Glass-Steagall, so that you Glass-Steagall, so you guarantee Glass-Steagall, so that Glass-Steagall, so you guarantee Glass-Steagall, so that Glass-Steagall, so you guarantee.
Sir.
Claudio Celani from EIR Strategic Alert Service. Let's move out of Greece. Let's go into Spain. My question concerns the issue of the exposure of the EU banking system. And in this context, many observers do say that Greece represents a systemic risk for the exposure of the European banking system. Maybe you could just answer yes or no to this. But there is a growing concern for the permanence of a whole array of high-risk assets in the banking system, which is guaranteed by states, by central banks, etc. And there is growing concern for the case of Spain, because not only of the real estate, the collapse of the real estate values, therefore the assets related to the real estate bubble, but also because of, if you take the case of Santander, which is the largest bank in the Eurozone, the other bubble represented by the high yield investments in Brazil. And therefore, in view of this, the remaining of this risk in this whole array of high-risk assets, wouldn't be appropriate to think to a reorganization of the system according to a Glass-Steagall standard, like many propose? Glass-Steagall, so that Glass-Steagall, so you guarantee only for commercial bank assets, right? Commercial bank activity, but you don't guarantee for investment bank activity. Thanks.
Well, again, what you described is, I would say, the normal functioning of a market economy. In a market economy, banks, commercial banks, banks in general, are sorting out the various risks, have to analyze their risks, public risk, private risk, be very careful not to take too much risks as they did in the past. So you are, I would say, mentioning what is the normal preoccupation of risk management of a financial institution. And we are, as you know, working on that in the Basel Committee, in the Financial Stability Board, in order to be as sure as possible that we draw all the lessons from the present crisis. It's not a Spanish problem, it's not a European problem, it's a global problem, and we are reflecting on these issues. You mentioned yourself a country in the new hemisphere. We are working very, very actively on that. We are in a phase where you know that we are in, I would say, interaction with the private sector. The Basel Committee has published a number of indications, and we have a view to have decisions before the end of the year in those very, very important issues of appropriate prudentials and improvement, very, very significant improvement in risk management. Thank you very much. For domestic and external investors. Thank you very much indeed. So.
Thank you. Claudio Celani from EIR Strategic Alert Service. At the last press conference, Mr. Trichet, you might remember, I asked you a question on the separation of banking activities. So I was very happy in seeing that in the financial stability review of the ECB, there is one chapter dedicated to the issue. It's called Separated Banking and Securities Business, Glass-Steagall Revisited. But then I read it and I was disappointed because basically you reject it on the basis of two arguments, one of which I consider ideological and the other one is technical. So the ideological argument is that this is not in the tradition, European tradition of universal banking. Well, traditions can be changed. Before Glass-Steagall was introduced, this was also the tradition in the United States. And before firewalls were eliminated in Europe, 95, 96 or whatever, that process, so no longer than 10 years ago, we had this tradition. So the technical argument which you make in the report is that a separation of banking activities between commercial banks and investment banks might disturb the functionality of the market and might also hamper the integration of the markets. Now, you said a few minutes ago that the markets are not perfectly functioning now, which I think it's an understatement. I would say the markets are pretty dysfunctional. If you see in the media, we can read that one banking sector...
Sir, can I ask you the question?
Okay, so... Therefore, wouldn't be... I mean, the main point which is missed here is that through a separation, the issue of protection is clear. Governments can protect deposit-taking banks and commercial banks, and the rest is not protected. So we have all these toxic assets. We have an open-ended guarantee for quadrillions now. How are we going to solve this?
Again, I know your position because you expressed already it last time, and I understand that one can defend that position. Again, I also see, of course, that it is a debate which is traditional in the United States since a very long period of time. It is also true that it is the position that the ECB took, and that you reflected very well. We consider that it is not something that we would consider, I would say, urgent or even extraordinarily appropriate in our present situation. But I don't deny that you can have your opinion. You have your opinion. We have ours. Thank you very much indeed. So.
Mr. Trichet, I will not ask you a question on separation of banks this time.
No, it is your regular question, sir.
I don't think you have changed opinion.
No, I didn't change my opinion, and okay. You didn't change yours.
No.
I know that.
But allow me two questions. One on the stress tests. Can you confirm or deny the reports in the media today that the conditions include a depreciation of 17% of Greek bonds and 3% of Spanish bonds? And if this is true, isn't this too mild for a stress test? The second question is a broader one. Yesterday in Berlin there was a press conference by the famous 4 professors who have brought a constitutional challenge against the financial bailout of Greece. And now they have expanded their challenge to the whole safety net, financial safety net. Now, if you can no longer ignore their propositions because opinion polls in Germany say that the majority of the population support them. And if you read their texts, it's full of arguments which, from a constitutional law, make a lot of sense. Do you think that these initiatives are sticking to old concepts of law, constitutional law, and we have now new forms of international law which these people don't want to take into account? Thank you.
On your second point, I have no particular comment. This is a process, and there are procedures that are ongoing. I will not comment on that. You know our own position, and we think that what has been done by the executive branches, by the European institutions, is legal and correct and appropriate in the circumstances. We were expressing our opinion publicly on that, as you know, because we have been asked to give our opinion by the various governments concerned. On the first point, again, I have no other comment than what I have said until now. Thank you very much. Particular comment, but I remember I had already occasion of mentioning that we were not necessarily in the same universe as in Europe as in comparison with the United States of America.
Speaking about Greece, is
I was not expecting all questions on Greece.
No, no.
I'm afraid.
From Greece into the EFSF, yeah, because Greece is an opting-out member of the European Financial Stability Fund from the beginning, as one can read in the framework agreement. Now, the EFSF got the AAA last month, and you said that now we have a big deterrent. Deterrent was the word. Now, reading the framework agreement, let me question this, because if I understand correctly, in Chapter 8, Paragraph 2 of the framework agreement, it's clearly stated that when members become opting-out members, they apply for guarantees, then the gap of their quota is filled by the other guarantors. So I had this checked by a English mother language colleague, whether I understood this correctly. And therefore I would ask you, my question on this is whether you can confirm this reading, that the other members would fill the gap of the missing quota. Second question, in the first 9 months of this year, bank investments in high risk, in junk bonds, have increased of a whopping 55%. Now, aren't you disturbed by this the moment when you say that you confirm the unlimited liquidity allotments? Aren't you disturbed by the fact that banks are doing more high-risk investments than in the past years, and whether you have any idea or plans on how to change this? My third question is... Third question.
No, we have a rule here. Two questions.
Two questions I did. This is the third one.
Yeah?
It's very short. Whether you changed the idea on Glass-Steagall.
Oof. Okay, so I could respond first to the third question. It will take half an hour, and then we go back to the... First of all, I would only say that as far as Greece is concerned, you might remember that Greece benefited from an extraordinary help coming from the other countries, and Greece is already activating an extraordinary help. So I am a little bit surprised by what you say. It is true that a country which would benefit from the stabilization fund would not at the same time contribute to the same fund that would give this particular country help. But again, Greece is in a different situation from that standpoint, because Greece is already benefiting from this extraordinary financing. On the second question, we are calling all banks, and supervisors in all countries are calling all banks to be extraordinarily attentive to their risk management, and this is something which is, of course, in the present time, as well as in all times, absolutely of the essence. As regards our full allotment mode, which is a non-standard measure that still exists, as you know, and as I made the point, I would only say that in our understanding of the overall assessment on, again, at the level of the euro area as a whole, of the functioning of markets, we consider that it is still necessary, taking into account the fact that the market is not functioning correctly, at least until now, we consider it's necessary to have this non-standard way of permitting the monetary policy transmission channel to function as well as possible. If I may, when we are analyzing the situation, I would say we have on the one hand our interest rate and our standard measures that are there to ensure price stability in the medium term. We were credible in the past, we have delivered, we have a track record, and we are credible for the future. And the non-standard measures have the main aim to help, taking into account the fact that part of the market is not functioning normally, to help establish or re-establish or help restoring more appropriate functioning of the monetary policy transmission mechanism. On the Glass-Steagall, I have no particular comment, but I remember I had already occasion of mentioning that we were not necessarily in the same universe as in Europe as in comparison with the United States of America. And at this stage, I will not say that the model of universal banking is to be abandoned in Europe. Thank you very much. Monsieur. First, I have no particular comment on the declaration of the President of Iceland, which I didn't read, so it's not usual for me to comment on things I didn't read. I take it that the plan which we considered a good one, as I said a moment ago, has been discussed thoroughly with the IMF and with the Commission in liaison with us. Please.
Claudio Celani from EIR Strategical Air Service. Mr. Trichet, commenting on the Irish crisis, the President of Iceland, Mr. Grimson, a couple of days ago, pointed to the fact that the solution adopted by Iceland of separating the domestic debt of the banks from the foreign debt of the banks allowed the country to be today much better off, so that the government not only could protect its citizens, but could also renounce to the full amount of the IMF loan. My question is, what prevented you from acknowledging the success and suggesting the same solution for Ireland? My second question is related to the disclosure of Federal Reserve data on loans given to the banks at zero interest rates yesterday in the United States, which is creating some backlash, especially because of the long list of European banks which used Federal Reserve money. So that the author of the disclosure bill, Senator Sanders, who is an independent who has been re-elected, said yesterday in a press conference that Congress will now monitor much more closely Fed loans abroad, and he added that this will give Congress more authority to push for a reintroduction of bank separation, the famous Glass-Steagall Act. I'm not going to ask you my regular question on this because I know what your opinion is.
Thank you. I was fearing that you would have the third one, but you had two. Yeah, that's okay.
No, my second question is...
No, I have already two.
There was no question here.
I have already two questions. Yeah, there was no question. Okay. Then if there is no question, sir, I listened very carefully, but
this is the question. This is the question. Will this affect, how will this affect, whether this will affect Europe?
Thank you. First, I have no particular comment on the declaration of the President of Iceland, which I didn't read, so it's not usual for me to comment on things I didn't read. I take it that the plan which we considered a good one, as I said a moment ago, has been discussed thoroughly with the IMF and with the Commission in liaison with us. On the second question, I would only say that those European banks that are in the list had activities, and all what has been done was within the framework of global finance, and we are all interconnected, obviously. I think that this is part of what is, in my opinion, extremely important, that we continue to have an interconnected global finance, but also with level playing field, with fair treatment, with absence of going back to, I would say, some kind of inward looking in all various marketplaces. We need fair treatment, we need open and fair treatment, and I think that it is really what we are doing at a global level. As you know, it is the doctrine that we have, to have the same rules everywhere, to apply the same rules to all those who are participating. So I have no other comment than that, but I trust fully all other partners, not only the United States and the Fed, but also all other partners in the world, including in the emerging world. Thank you very much indeed. Sir. If it is not on the Glass-Steagall, I give you the floor.
Claudio Celani, EIR Strategic Alert Service. Mr. Trichet, allow me one remark and 2 questions. My remark is that I'm pleased to see that the ECB has posted a paper on a working paper which at least partially supports my views on Glass-Steagall. My questions
are very flattered to be on your side, if I may.
Thank you. My questions are the following. We get a little bit worried when we read and hear that the ECB, through its assets purchase program, is almost becoming a bad bank, and that there is even a threat of insolvency if this goes on for the ECB. So the sudden decision of the ECB to increase its capital, it's not easing this concern. And therefore, I would ask you if you can categorically rule out that there is even a distant threat of insolvency for the ECB. The second question is on the European Bailout Fund. Now, if the EFSF is not expanded, and then the government to not take the burden of bailing out the banks, and this burden is left entirely to the ECB, then is this insolvency threat in this case becoming real? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't comment anymore on the Glass-Steagall Act. On the ECB, let me only say that the insolvency of the ECB question is an absurd question from our standpoint. Let me say that as regards the capital increase, we started with 5 billion, as you know, since 2000. So a long time ago, there was a decision, the 8th of May 2000, that was foreseeing an increase in the capital of the ECB with an additional 5 billion. So 10 years ago, the idea that it would be appropriate to go from 5 to 10, exactly from 5.76 to 10.76, was, judged appropriate by the Governing Council of the Central Bank. Now, we have a rule where we provision in our own institution at the level of the capital. And we were at the maximum level of provisioning, so we thought it was time precisely to permit to continue to make the appropriate provisioning, as we said, in view of the increased volatility of the foreign exchange rates, the interest rates risk that all central banks of the world have, the gold price and the increased volatility also in the gold prices, and all kind of risk, including credit risk that we might have. This is, I would say, good management, sound management by an institution like ours. On the EFSF, I already responded that our message had been and was improvement in quantity and in quality, namely in terms of flexibility of intervention of this fund. Thank you very much. Sir. I suspect that you will ask a question on a particular subject. Am I right?
I deny this allegation.
Please.
It hasn't directly to do with it, of course. As you know, the government of the United States has published the Financial Crisis Inquiry Report, which is the report of the 2 years' work of the Commission in the United States. It's a 500 pages report, which is quite an enterprise for a common mortal to read. But for you, I think it has been quite easy. And my first question is whether you think that such reports are important for you as a central banker. And the second question is, although I know that you don't like to comment statements by other persons or authorities, but I would like to read one sentence which is of a general nature and ask your opinion on this. And the conclusion, this sentence is in the conclusion of the report and says, "We conclude this financial crisis was avoidable. Despite the expressed view of many on Wall Street and in Washington that the crisis could not have been foreseen or avoided, there were warning signs." Would you agree with this? Would you disagree?
Two things. First of all, whether the judgment on the fact that there was very significant underpricing of risk, underpricing of spreads, underassessment of risk premia in global finance in general, before the start of the crisis, even before the start of the turbulences, it was certainly possible. And I am myself, on behalf of the ECB, a living witness, because I made the point in January 2007, so before the start of the turbulences, that we were observing a general underpricing of risk, a general underassessment of risk premia, a general, a very abnormal low volatility level in global finance. And I was recorded for having said that in the past. So it is certainly, and I have to say that the central banks, more generally, particularly when they met in Basel, had this sentiment. But that being said, the other question is, was it possible to avoid? And it is, of course, our working assumption. We are drawing all the lessons from the crisis at a global level, in the US, in Europe, in other advanced economy, and certainly also in the rest of the world, in the emerging world, with the idea that through the appropriate strengthening of prudentials, through the appropriate improvement of all rules, regulations, standards and codes in global finance, through the emergence of these institutions that are, I would say, particularly designed to look at systemic risk and macro-prudentials, and it is the case, as you know, on both sides of the Atlantic, and also through the appropriate coordination of macro policies with a view of having macro policies that would avoid imbalances and abnormal, loose, unsound behavior. All this is designed to avoid or minimize the risk of such a crisis. It was a dramatic crisis. It's been a crisis which was the worst, again, since World War II, could have been the worst since World War I, had we not ourselves and the other central banks, we were on the front line, decided to act in a very, very, very short span of time. And had the governments not decided to take also themselves very, very important measures. So what is clear is that we do not want that to recommence. We do not want authorities to and the private sector to be placed in such circumstances. And this is no time for complacency. I was saying that it is no time for complacency for the European and for the euro area. At the global level, it is the same. We all have a big, big problem. We have done a lot of hard work, but a lot of very hard work remains to be done, and it would be an enormous mistake to consider that now it's business as usual, that the recovery being there, we could, I would say, be tranquille again and not do the hard work I was mentioning. It is true for the private sector. It is also true for the public sector. We have to be fully aware of. It is not because from time to time we are in more tranquil and calm waters, that we should not being extremely active in delivering what is necessary. Thank you very. Two last questions then, Monsieur and Madame.